For me, I think sometimes it's what you said. I mean, you just accepting this is the church and submitting under the church. And then, like you said, you grow into it.
A large part of our congregation is very Russian. They do a lot of the services in primarily Russian still, which was actually funny when I first started attending, because they did a vigil service in fully Russian, and I had somebody come up to me and was like, "Are you okay? You're not going to understand anything." And I'm like, "I've been going to a Hebrew synagogue for the last 14 years. I didn't understand anything there either. We're good."
What your ideal that you've kind of discovered on the internet is like a cognitive framework, but now we're like really going to live it. And living it out hurts. And living it out, you know, we're all on Noah's Ark, and like the ark is kind of smelly. Like, you know, it's not this like perfect ideal.
Hello and welcome back to part 3 of a very exciting series that Justin and I are just absolutely delighted and honored to present to all of our subscribers and viewers. This part 3 in a series about women converts to the Orthodox Church. As I've said in the first 2 episodes of this series, there's a lot that's going out and being released on podcasts about men joining the church. And that's wonderful, and we're all happy about that. What about the women? Where are they? A lot of podcasts seem to suggest that they're missing, or they're not doing anything. They're not joining. They're not coming around, which is really not the truth. Certainly, it may be in some places, but there are a lot of women joining the Orthodox Church, and this is the story that needs to be told. So today we have with us 3 more women who are going to talk about their stories, and some have some interesting things to say. So welcome to Sarah from Lansing, Michigan, Amanda from Florida, and Nisa from Alberta, Canada. Well, ladies, welcome. Good to have you all with us. Let me ask you if you would take a few minutes and introduce yourselves to our viewers. Tell us a little bit about your journey and where you are right now. Sarah, let's begin with you.
Okay, well, hello, I'm Sarah. I first heard of Orthodoxy, I was probably 4th or 5th grade, and my dad was doing his PhD, and I saw a sentence in his book that said like the Western Church versus the Eastern Church, and I said, well, what is that? Like, isn't there just one church? Like, what is this? So, I mean, my dad was the first to explain kind of like the history of an Eastern and Western church, and it just kind of sat there in my brain. And I went off to do college and seminary and started getting more interested in a more historical church. I was kind of interested in Anglicanism and Church of England and even Catholicism, and just was feeling, not that I was never upset with my background, or I just felt like there was more. There was more than what I was seeing. I'm very interested in the Old Testament. That's what I studied. Like the ancient Near East is my bread and butter, and I just felt like there wasn't a continuity between this Old Testament community and what I was seeing. So basically, long story short, my husband was, he pretty much knew he was going to be Orthodox. And so I was having dialogues with him for years while we were dating and engaged and even married. And one day I went to an Orthodox church with him, and I was seeing Exodus in front of me, and I was seeing Revelation in front of me, and it just clicked. That doesn't mean I didn't have any qualms. I had qualms, but I was like, this is it. And I'm submitting to this church, even with my qualms. And that was kind of it for me. I think that, and so it was kind of just a slow journey of first hearing about it as a kid and talking about it a lot with my boyfriend, and then fiance, and then husband. And here I am. And I have been Orthodox now charismated for 6.5 years. So yeah, that's me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Amanda, please share with us.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I am married and I have 4 kids. And so I guess I was raised non-denominational Baptist. And so within the last few years, just raising my kids, my oldest is 10. And so I just was really committed to teaching her like the faith. You know, I feel like my husband and I wandered a little bit and we made our mistakes, and so I wanted to prevent that from them for them. And so digging deeper, my daughter would ask all these crazy questions, to be honest, and that's what really got me digging. And the more I looked for answers or asked questions, there was nowhere to ask the questions to, because everyone has a different answer. In, you know, a Protestant world, some say this, some say that, whether it's infant baptism or a plethora of questions that we had. And so we just really started digging deeper, and I realized pretty quickly that I was no longer Protestant. And I took that to my husband, and he was, as I started looking at like Baptist catechisms, for example, I was like, "Ooh, I don't believe that. I don't think I believe that either. I don't." And so he was like, "Well, maybe, you know, we'll just teach them that we don't agree with those things." And to me, that was not an option. I said, you know, you can't attend a church and say, "Well, I'm going to pick and choose." The picking and choosing was so overwhelming for me when I'm teaching my kids something. And so that was really hard. And so when I realized I wasn't Protestant, I started digging. I had no idea what Orthodoxy was. For years, we actually lived behind a Greek Orthodox church, and I just thought they were like Greek Christians. Like, I didn't realize I was Protestant, to be honest. I thought like that was just Christianity. Everyone's Protestant or Catholic. That was the only, you know, caveat. And so we were presented with like Catholicism, Orthodoxy. I would send my husband videos, and he would say like, "Oh, wow, that sounds right on." And he had questions that he had for years. And so they just answered those questions. And so once I would send him something or send him information, he would send things back to me. And so we just knew right away that Orthodoxy was the truth. It just answered every question. Even things I thought I would have issues with just made sense. We sat with our now priest, and again, he just answered questions in a way that made so much sense. So wonderful. We were baptized just this past Lazarus Saturday, my whole family.
Oh, God be praised. Amen. Nisa.
Hi. So my background is pretty mixed. Growing up in Alberta, it's Protestant or Catholic for the vast majority. I was raised with a pretty mixed background. My parents were split. So on one hand, one household was agnostic, one household was Baptist Alliance, but with very heavy Catholic influence and very heavy Catholic history in the family. And so I grew up with Catholic school, but attending a Baptist church for a long time. So I was exposed to like a lot of it. I didn't become a Christian myself, though, until I was an adult. I dabbled in the occult and studied world religions for quite a long time. I became a Christian as an adult and just joined the church I knew to join. And it wasn't until after I was married that I started taking my faith seriously. In that process, my husband and I began to research like the early church and the church fathers and things like that. And we actually became Messianic Jews. He is Jewish biologically. I'm Indigenous. So for me, it was a total transition. For him, it was, this is where he always was. So for him, it was smooth. And so we transitioned 14 years ago to Messianic Judaism. And I've always studied theology. I was in a bunch of theology groups. And a friend I met online introduced me to Eastern Orthodoxy, which I had basically written off as just different Catholic, and had never looked much deeper than that. And so when he started giving me different answers than Catholic, I started paying a little more attention. 2 years ago, we got introduced to another dear friend of ours, and he was Eastern Orthodox. He was a ROCOR convert, and so we were having discussions and banter, and it was very much for probably the first year, each of us trying to convert the other. And he had talked us into going and checking it out, and our closest synagogue is 2.5 hours. So when I started going to the Orthodox Church, it was to join Vespers on Saturday, because we could go and worship on Saturday with other people, and it was something to start. And that was a year ago. And I got baptized on August 2nd of this year. So we can see where me starting to attend went, because it was everything that the first century was supposed to be. And when that was always my goal in my faith, when it clicked, it clicked.
Wow. These are fascinating stories. And in fact, I think anybody's journey is fascinating because there's so much wrapped up in it that most people, when they start to hear a journey, they don't know everything that's happening behind the scenes. I want to ask you all, everybody who talks about coming to Orthodoxy usually talks about, it was beautiful. It was icons and incense and this beautiful singing and vestments. And there's sort of this beauty aesthetic that plays a big role in that. And people talk about the worship and how they've never worshiped like that before and things like that. Or they'll talk about the theology, before they ever went to an Orthodox church, they studied theology and they read about theosis, or they read about, whatever it is. But I want to ask you all, was there a someone rather than a something that greatly influenced you in your journey? So not the worship, not the icons, not the, whatever, not the theology. Was there someone who really influenced you because of behavior, because of their love for Christ, whatever? Was there someone that influenced you in your journey? And tell us a little bit more about that. Anybody got that one?
Yeah, sure. I can start that.
Oh, you can
start. So for me, it was actually kind of 4, because it was the first friend online, Brent, who introduced me to the idea. It was my friend Braden who got me going to the Orthodox Church here. When I really began to start to consider it, one of my good friends, Philip, is in the US, and he's from the same theology group as Brent, and we talk theology all the time. And when I first mentioned it to him, we actually worked together on one of his blog ministries. And he goes, actually, I'm trying to go to an Orthodox church. I'm in the process. And I went, what? And so it was this confirmation where the two of us across everything both were kind of looking at it that, okay, maybe there is something more here. I'm not totally off my rocker. And then the final tip for me was my son. When we started exploring Orthodoxy, he was coming with me all the time, and he jumped head first. He was thinking about converting and being baptized, and that was a discussion with, of course, my husband and I, since we were still Messianic. And unfortunately, he passed this past spring. And in the process, I was already kind of at the point where I was looking at Orthodoxy quite seriously myself. And for me, it was seeing all the things that he now misses out on, and knowing that I didn't want to keep missing out on them, with communion, with the sacraments, with properly being part of the church and part of the body. So that was kind of my final tipping point, where I was like, yeah, okay, it's time to do this. And I had the conversation with my husband. We're like, yeah, it's time. I should start talking to the Father. And I actually came home laughing the next Sunday, because my priest came up to me and went, are you ready to be baptized yet? So I'm like, okay, we're going for this now.
Today's episode is brought to you by St. Athanasius College. Looking to get an accredited and robust Orthodox education while earning a degree? St. Athanasius College provides accelerated programs designed for busy adults. Use our code, Transfigured75, to save $75 on registration. The website link is in the description. Get started today.
Well, Nisa, I just wanted to offer the observation that your son is not missing out on anything right now. God may his soul rest in peace. Thank you for that. Amanda, anybody that played a role in your journey?
So in our original, when we first started in real life, no, because I didn't know anyone that was Orthodox. So online, priests, and just seeing the way that they would express themselves and the way that they answered questions so graciously. And so that originally drew us in. And then the church we currently attend, it's a small mission parish in Greenville, Florida. And when we started there, once we met our priest and his wife, they just, I mean, we were already sold on Orthodoxy, but meeting them in person and him being able to answer all their questions with so much patience and love, and just always being available to us, just seeing, I think, the connection between a priest and their parishioners was incredible for our journey. I had never experienced anything like that. And so in real life, it was definitely our priest and his wife, just beautiful people that just really walked alongside us. And it was perfect because we're a tiny parish, and he had more time to give us. So we were very confused at first with we were sold, but again, so many questions that we had and so many things that we didn't know. We didn't know anything. We came from zero. So it was definitely our priest.
Okay.
My experience, yes, there was definitely people, and I will get to that, but I just wanted to touch on, because I've seen a previous episode about people talk about like the beauty of the church and the iconography, and just, I actually had the opposite reaction initially, where that actually turned me off initially. I had kind of my Judas Iscariot moment where I was like, well, look at where the money could be going towards. Why is it going towards the vestments? Why is it going towards a chalice? Why is it going to, like, that was my initial thing, is my initial response was, this bothers me. And I just wanted to share that because I don't hear that often. And I just want people to know, like, that is a legitimate reaction to have, because
believe me, we clergy hear that a lot.
there was a lot of like pomp, and it was like, okay, what is the point of this? So that was my like initial actually knee-jerk reaction. So it wasn't that stuff that drew me in. It was, if I'm being honest, as I said, like my now husband, who we've been married almost 10 years now, at the time, my boyfriend, fiance, he was always, I mean, he had an icon prayer corner in his dorm room. He was burning incense when he prayed. I was like, what are you doing? Like, what is this? And just talking through stuff and seeing the life he was living, it was like, he was probably the most authentic person I'd ever met. And just this, I did not come to Orthodoxy quickly. He was kind of someone who said, I'm going to end up Orthodox. I mean, it was like told right away, like, this is the church I'm going to, but we continued, I was kind of exploring my denominational stuff and he was doing his thing. And, we kind of knew we were going to end up together. And I was exploring the priesthood ordination in the Anglican, the ACNA church specifically, the Anglican Church of North America. It was getting very disillusioned in that process. And I was like, okay, Bryant, I'm going to come to the Orthodox Church with you. And I think my heart was just in this place where all of a sudden, when I went that time, instead of seeing gold and opulence, I saw the tabernacle. I saw like, this is what's in Exodus and this is what's in Revelation. And it just clicked. It was like a God moment. It was like, this is that continuity, and it's there. And this is this living God in front of me. It hasn't changed. It's just Christ has entered into time, and now we're on the other end of it instead of, on the Old Testament end of it. And so it was really just the witness of my husband. And I think, we started attending in 2018 and we met in 2013. So that's 5 years of just 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah, 5 years of just being in a relationship with him, whether it was dating, engaged, or married. And it was just this point where this is the church and I'm going to submit to it, even though I do have qualms. And almost all of my qualms have been worked out in these 6.5 years, just by saying, it would be better for me to be wrong inside the church than to be correct outside of it. I had to kind of like make that point and say, I'm going to submit to this, even with my qualms. So there was that. And then there was also just the women of the church. We started in a Greek parish, the yayas of the church, and their witness was amazing. Like how they lived theology in what they cooked, how they lived theology and how they invited you into your home, how they were like the wisdom keepers of the parish. And it was like, this is what I see in Genesis. This is what I see. It's like, it's living in front of me. This is when you see Paul thanking Lydia in all these letters. It's like, this is what it is. It's these women like harboring the faith and living it out and nesting in this beautiful way in order for, you know, the priesthood to be what it is and for the sacraments to be what it is. They've harbored this space. And so it was kind of that. It was just like the old like yayas of the church, I would say, for me to just see this life of how they lived it. And also just like, I think the witness of my husband, who never tried to press anything. If anything, he was like, I don't know if you should go to the church because this is like a big commitment. You know what I mean? He almost pushed opposite of maybe this isn't maybe something you want, you know. He kind of knew where I was at, and just, it was very much the Lord's timing and letting me kind of struggle and wrestle with things like Jacob does. And that's okay, and having space to do it. And it's the people who drew me near. It wasn't necessarily the beauty. So that was just kind of because a lot of people talk about the beauty, and I just want to say that was just not my response. Now it is. Now I love it. But it's a different, it takes a while of living in the life and saying, I'm going to submit to this and learn. And then it just starts to change you. So yeah, sorry that was so long-winded.
Sarah brings up an interesting thing, and our viewers that are watching, I want to kind of pose this question to you too. Sarah brought up kind of an interesting paradox. One of her first reactions was, oh, what is all this stuff? And what, you know, we we could have sold this and given to the poor, you know, and all of that kind of thing. And then she said, and then something clicked and I saw the tabernacle. I think that was the phrase you used. And yes, that's a very interesting reaction, because a lot of people do come into the Orthodox Church and there's certain things about it they like, because when, let's face it, when a lot of people come into the Orthodox Church, they've already read Timothy Ware, and, you know, they've gone through this list of stuff that they've already read, and they've gone online and they've listened to podcasts and this and that. So they know a lot. And then they come to the worship service and something hits them, icons or Mary or whatever it is. There's something that stops them. How do we encourage our brothers and sisters, but particularly our sisters in Christ? How do we encourage them for something to pop, like Sarah said? You know, how do we help people see past the vestments and the incense, or maybe just, I hope you kind of understand what I'm saying. People come to our churches and they have objections and they have things that they're wrestling with. Like I mentioned, the biggest things that people wrestle with when they come to the Orthodox Church are tend to be icons and Mary. Were those, let's stop there for just a moment. Were those the two big things for you guys to wrestle with, or were there other things that you were wrestling with more than icons and Mary? Nisa, let me go back to you, if we can start kind of.
I don't know that I'd say they were my two biggest hurdles. Mary was definitely one of them, because of course I had been raised around a lot of Roman Catholic Mariology and had a lot of issues with what I had learned there. So I had to not so much fight the Protestant lack of Mary discussion, but the Catholic over Mary discussion. So I had to go through a little bit of that. And for me, I was already at a point where it was like, okay, well, the Protestants and most Messianics don't give her enough respect. So it was a little easier for me to make that adjustment. Icons weren't really a struggle for me at all. I know for some Messianics, for a lot in my Protestant circles, they definitely are. For me, it was already an understanding that, you know, we're representing who they are, just from looking to, say, the snake on the staff with Moses, where it's clear that they're not bowing to the bronze serpent, they're bowing to Christ. They're you go to synagogue and they bring the Torah around and you kiss the Torah. You know that you're not kissing the paper, you're submitting that to the word of God. And so the idea of icons was already not foreign to me. For me, the biggest hurdles were the understanding of Sabbath, the keeping of a lot of the Torah commandments and how that was understood. That was the biggest change for me, because so much of it was already the same. We're already following the same structure because it is from first century. We're like to the point that the chanting pace during reading is the same at our old synagogue or at my current church. So it was so similar in so many ways that it was just, here's the completion.
You're muted again, Father.
I don't want to start a coughing fit while we're having a part of our discussion. So Amanda, what did you have to work through? What were the things that you encountered that were things you had to prayerfully work through?
So I didn't have much because I had so many questions that I was just A, glad to receive answers, or B, really relieved to hear someone say like, well, we don't have the answer because we're not God, right? So, oh, how does the Eucharist become the body and blood? Well, you know what? We're not God, so we don't have all the answers. That to me was a relief because I was so used to people trying to explain away all of my questions and just make things up to answer why, you know, the age of reason is 7. Like, where did, you know? So those bigger issues were not an issue for me. The same thing with the Theotokos. It was almost like a light bulb. Like when I heard, you know, well, she is the current Ark of the Covenant. Like she held Christ. It just made sense to me. And then I also feel that I had seen almost like that toxic submission in certain Protestant circles. And so it made sense that, well, yeah, if the mother of God is just a vessel or nothing, or he could have picked anyone, then where does that leave the rest of us? You know, what are we? So those kind of things made sense for me, but I actually really resonate with what you were saying, Sarah, about the extravagance almost of like how I saw it at the time, because in Baptist churches, it is 4 plain walls. You do not have any adorning anything. It's like the cheapest that you can possibly get. And so it's funny because our mission started off in like a little medical center. So it was like a couple icons, and the icons themselves were not an issue. I understood, but it was the money that went into it. And again, like you said, that Judas moment of saying like, well, why are we spending? Why aren't we feeding the poor and feeding all these, you know? So that was probably my biggest issue coming. And again, I accepted it as correct. Like I had already, the first time we visited the first time a bigger parish in Jacksonville. And so I was overwhelmed just with everything, but I understood. Like once I saw the icons, I understood like, oh, okay, this is heaven. Like this, I get it. But everyone bowing, I didn't know what was going on. I was so used to just coming in with coffee, sitting down, listening, or like, you know, like listen to my music, you know? And so the different routine really threw me off. So it was more that. It was more the liturgical. I actually had someone when we were converting and we were telling the people that we had been at church with that we were converting. One of the girls I had told to said, well, was it the liturgy that drew you in? And I'm like, no, actually, it really overwhelms me. And I don't know what's happening. So I'm actually confused. I just walked in and knew it was true. So that's why we stuck it out. So for me, it was definitely the buildings, but I've come now. It's great now. Now I totally understand the importance of beauty. And in the West too, we like look down on beauty, right? Everything is ugly and square and plain. Yeah. So I definitely, and once I heard, I think it was maybe Father Josiah Trenham said, you know, why are our houses nicer than our churches? And for me, that was a light bulb moment for sure.
Now, Sarah, we kind of heard you tell us an answer to this question, but I'm going to kind of change the narrative now a little bit and ask you all, and Sarah, I'd like to begin with you. You mentioned, and then one day it clicked. So you had this opinion. Why all this extravagance? You know, it's kind of holding me back. And then one day it clicked and I saw the tabernacle. What do you think caused that click? What was it that finally became what I like to call the aha moment? What happened?
It was God. I mean, it's God works with you, his timing, his pacing, right? Like, because I had been to that Orthodox church a few times. I'd been to other Orthodox churches in seminary a few times, and I never had that response. And I really just think it was God preparing me. I had to go through an ordination process. I had to go through all these, right? I mean, like I had to have my own wrestling moment because there was nothing, I mean, right? Like I always go back to Genesis. Jacob had a moment at Bethel with the ladder and the angels were ascending and descending. And yet he still was not fully committed. He was still like, okay, God, if you do all these things, then I'll do it. And yet it took him almost a whole lifetime to actually commit his whole household to God way later back at Bethel. But you know, like, but there was no difference. God showed up in both instances, but it took Jacob that long, right? So I think it was just, I needed to go through whatever I needed to go through, and it was God's timing, and it was God putting the people in and the places in and however it was. And being, well, I mean, also being really willing to have qualms too, I think was nice, is both the priest that I was a catechist under, a catechumen under, and my husband were both really supportive of saying, like, you don't have to be okay with everything. I remember my first salutation service, I really struggled with some of these prayers that we say about Mary, that they were told. I really struggled. And people saying, hey, that is okay. Like, if it's a big struggle for you to say in this prayer, like, Most Holy Theotokos, save us, don't say it. The rest of the church is saying it, and that is okay. And right, and just being okay with, I don't have to, right? Like, I don't have to have some cognitive hill. It doesn't have to be a huge framework. And I don't know, all that stuff has been worked out. And now it's like, I confidently pray that every, right? I have no problem now. It's just, I think it's really just God. And I think it's being okay with struggling, and it's being okay with, hey, God, are you going to show up in this? Because I think this is it. But like, I really need you to show up, and just surrendering that over and just seeing what God does with it. Because God will make it clear. He knows you better than anyone else. And he's, you know what I mean? He's got a journey for everyone. So.
Amen. Yeah. Ladies, what do you think?
I think for me, I think sometimes it's what you said. I mean, you just accepting this is the church and submitting under the church. And then, like you said, you grow into it. And like in my personal situation with our mission parish, like we're growing with our mission. So it's been beautiful for us. So it's like, as we like, now we're in our own small building, and there's more icons up, and we have a little more to look at going on. And so it's just growing with yourself and allowing yourself the time. But for me, it wasn't necessarily like a moment where I said, okay, I'm going to accept this. I had already accepted Orthodoxy. So it was just, okay, I already accepted this is true. This is the one true church. This is the Holy Catholic Apostolic Church. This is where I'm staying. And so my brain just has to catch up. That's all. Everything doesn't have to be, like you said, like everything doesn't have to be like an intellectual battle. Like I have to understand. Like if you just accept the church is true in everything, then eventually you will catch up to that acceptance of the church being true.
So are we saying, and Nisa, I don't mean to exclude your observation from this, but are we saying it's okay to doubt?
I think would it be wrong to, I mean, I don't know. That's a given. To doubt is to be human, to have moments of, I mean, look at the witness of all the saints before us. There was always moments of doubt, and I would, maybe not everyone's life, but I would argue almost every single one's life. I feel like that's human. There's space to wonder and space to go, is this right? Is this, I mean, you could just open up the pages of your Bible and it's littered. Everyone in there had their moments. I don't know anyone who doesn't.
Yeah, I love the story of Jonah and Nineveh. You know, Jonah got mad at God because Nineveh repented, you know, and so
I don't know that I'd necessarily use the word doubt in my case. For me, it wasn't a doubt. It was, okay, if I'm going to understand this aspect differently or that aspect differently, who's more likely to be right? Me or those who were taught by the apostles, those who, you know, were our church fathers. And so that was kind of one of my things. And then because of my background was studying theology and needing to look into all the minutiae and all the apologetics and all the explanations to everything. One thing that really kind of helped me shift was reading the book Thinking Orthodox, and how it helps to adjust you from, we need all these answers, to God is bigger than that. And he's going to explain things differently to us, and we can't comprehend some of them. So looking into some of that minutia isn't necessarily, you know, there can be benefits, but there can also be detriments in shrinking him to our thought processes. And so for me, it came down to, okay, the areas where, I'm still very new to ROCOR. There are a couple things where I'm a little unsure of still, or a little different on still. Are those things big enough for me to not submit to the church? No. Are those things big enough for me to not recognize the authority and the beauty of the body of Christ in what it is? No. So do they matter? No. And for me, that was kind of my final step of, okay, those things will change with time. As Sarah said, it's taken her a number of years. So right now, am I fully on board with the minutia? I'm still working through things, and I'm going to still be working through things. But it was what was more important.
And one could even ask, do you know what all that minutia is at this point?
Never.
I'm amazed. I've been a priest for 32 years. I'm 68 years old. I've been Orthodox pretty much all my life, and I still find out things from year to year. I didn't know that. Wow. Oh, that's really cool. I just learned something new. So do we know it all? No. And will we ever know it all? It depends. Some people learn a lot, but still, even the greatest saints of our church didn't know everything. They knew everything at a different level. They may not necessarily have known minutia. But isn't that minutia? Isn't that the stuff people get caught up in when they go visiting Orthodox churches? And it's kind of unfortunate to see people who do get caught up in that, because they can't see the forest from the trees, right? And they let that minutia slow them down. Do you have friends in your parishes that are struggling with what are your friends in the parish struggling with? What are they dealing with that maybe you're helping them with, or maybe you see the priest helping them with? How do we help our friends, our brothers and sisters in Christ, get through their journey, get through their struggle? How can we help them with what we've been through or are going through, other than prayer? Obviously, that's there.
I think, and this is going to sound really weird because I'm on a podcast right now, okay? I think one of the strengths of the Orthodox convert surge that's been happening is also its weakness. I think people are discovering Orthodoxy through the internet. And then they're going to show up and expect a perfect dichotomy that they learned on the internet. And then they're going to show up and have to rub shoulders with real flesh and blood people who might not think in that internet framework that you found. Or so it's no, this is a real community, a real bride of Christ who has real problems. And all we can do is show up and say, you know what this ideal that you've kind of discovered on the internet is like a cognitive framework, but now we're really going to live it. And living it out hurts. And living it out, we're all on Noah's Ark, and the ark is kind of smelly. It's not this perfect ideal. It's not this. And so I think, again, we're having this huge surge of people coming in from the internet. And yet sometimes I don't necessarily see in the young people a huge willingness to jump in and learn from the yayas and learn from the people who've been Orthodox, who have nothing to do with the internet, who've been Orthodox for generations, and they have stuff to teach you. And it might be different than what you read on the internet. And you need to be okay with that and open yourself up to something that's different than this big mental exploration you did on the internet. And I know that sounds really weird because I'm on a podcast and we're on the internet. I get it. But it's also, whenever there's a great strength, I also think there's a weakness. There's an Achilles heel tied to it. And I think the young people coming in, I think we need to just really submit to the people who've been Orthodox for a long time and get off the internet a little bit and find those yayas and find those people who can just feed into you, even if they say something that is slightly different than what you heard on the internet. Talk to your priest, open up to them instead of going on an internet binge of stuff. It's just, I think be a part of the actual flesh and blood community, not the zeros and ones community that comprises the digital world. As I say this, knowing I'm on a podcast and it's the greatest ironic statement, I get it. But that's what I would say, because that's what I see tripping up young converts personally. Okay, soapbox done.
Okay, well, that's a very good observation. Ladies, what do you think?
For me, one of the biggest hurdles that we've had in the area is kind of twofold. Is one that a lot of people hear Russian Orthodox and think you have to be Russian. And that is so far from the case and so perfectly modeled at my church. Because on one hand, yes, a large part of our congregation is very Russian. They do a lot of the services in primarily Russian still, which was actually funny when I first started attending, because they did a vigil service in fully Russian. And I had somebody come up to me and was like, "Are you okay? You're not going to understand anything." And I'm like, "I've been going to a Hebrew synagogue for the last 14 years. I didn't understand anything there either. We're good." But for a lot of people, that's been different. And our church has been doing very well at trying to start changing that. We always have our translators for the homily and things like that. But besides just the language aspect, a lot of people worry, "Oh, well, I'm not Russian, even if it's not language." Well, I'm Indigenous. There's Mexicans, Cubans, Ukrainians coming to our church. I think as far as immigration goes, we're probably 50% Ukrainian and Russian at Martyr St. George in Sylvan Lake. And it is fantastic for that, because we're proving that that's not the requirement. You don't have to be Greek to go to the Greek church. You don't have to be, whatever they are, because of this ethnocentric mindset that a lot of people think you have to be just because it's in the name. And then the other problem is, and I know in a lot of states this is a problem as well, but up here, because Alberta is so big, there can be hours between locations.
Yeah.
And a lot of people struggle with finding a church close enough to them that they can get to. And so that becomes the next part of the hurdle is, okay, if that church is 3 hours away, go once a month. If that church is that far away, you just try. And for me, that was a norm, because our closest synagogue was 2.5 hours. So we would do that when we could, and you do the best you can. Whereas I've got another friend who lives a couple hours away from me. She doesn't drive. She's 2 hours from her closest parish. But because she doesn't drive, she relies on when any of her Orthodox friends are able to go and get her and bring her to a church. And so she hasn't even been able to be baptized yet, because she hasn't been able to build that relationship with the priest. So it's definitely a struggle, but I just encourage everybody, get out there where you can, make the commitment to go when you can, and start being in contact online with those that you can.
Nisa makes an interesting observation to our dear viewers of this episode who have come across this point before. For an Orthodox Christian, oh yeah, I go 30 minutes to church. I go 90 minutes to church. I go 2 hours to church. I go one. I'm not saying that's the norm, but for us to have to travel is not a big deal. The average convert coming from a place where their parish is 5 minutes down the road finds our experience of travel to be something that can be very detrimental to their thinking about joining a community. So it is something that presents itself in the story of the journey. Amanda, any thoughts on this topic?
I think that for us personally at our parish, it was actually really fun, because a huge influx of us came in at the exact same time. And so we were all made catechumens at the same time. And so now that we're all baptized, we're able to kind of get everybody else excited. The few catechumens we have now it's like lessened, the number, because we all got baptized. And so I think a lot of it is just being excited and being willing to not have all the answers. Like it kind of goes back to what we were saying, but we try to answer every single question. In the West, we're so intellectual about everything, and we just need like an exact answer. And sometimes you don't need all the answers right now. So I think just like demonstrating, sharing your story, like coffee hour is the best. And so you just sit with someone that doesn't go often, or someone that's new, and, ask them their story. You share your story, and you kind of start seeing that it's for the most part, there are similar aspects of everyone's journey where you can resonate and connect. And so I think it's just that. I think it's for the people, at least in our church, I feel like just being an encouragement that like us, we have 4 kids. They're half of them are usually crying. We're like in and out, just being, and we're still there. And so just being like an encouragement, like, you can do this. Like, it is a far drive. Like, for us, everyone drives far. It's a far drive. You have kids. It's okay. Like, you come here and you're a family and you eat together. And even if you have questions and hangups, you will get there. You don't have to answer them today.
What do you all think is the thing that is driving men to join the Orthodox Church, and what do you think the thing is that's driving women to join? Because the recent so-called surge in men coming to the church has been talked about, but not what might be driving women to join. So, any thoughts on that? What's the difference between what drives men and women to join the church? Nisa, let me ask you if you can help kick us off on that.
Sure. I think one thing that's definitely a factor is there seems to be this return in society to what it is to actually be masculine and feminine. And that within the Orthodox Church, they never lost that. And so they're seeing that in the men's case, many of them are seeing that Christianity can be masculine. It's not a women's only emotional experience, as it is in many evangelical or charismatic churches that a lot of people are being brought up around. And so they're getting that drive. And at the same time, there's been a goal for a lot of women to return away from what feminism created and changed to what God actually created us as men and women in the true sense, and not the abused sense or the changed sense that many different churches land up in. And so I think that's definitely played a part in it. And at the same time, there has been a growth in, even just the last 10 years on people honestly examining their faith and questioning the truth of what they believe and why that is what they believe. And they're finding those answers in Orthodoxy.
Nisa, you just said, you mentioned the word feminism. Do you think Orthodoxy is the anti-feminism religion? Is it an anti-feminist faith? What do you think?
I think in the linguistic sense, yes, because with what feminism has kind of become, it pushes so against what biblically the role of women were and the positions of what is feminine. But at the same time, I think that when it comes to, the historic and the reality of femininity, I think Orthodox Christianity is probably the most feminist there is, because it elevates proper womanhood in such a respected sense, and it holds us to such a high regard.
Good point. Sarah, thoughts?
I think young single men are flocking into the church because our society is pretty kind of anti-masculine men right now. I mean, it's you see it in the school system right away, like sit still, be contained, have good social norms. Right. Boys are like meant to run and rough and tumble. They like don't, right? So it's we're overly feeling oriented. And so we're kind of teaching from a young age, like how you should handle there's just not good outlets, I think, for men right now. And I think even in it's just the reality of even, man, with how everything is so managed, even in the workplace, of what you can and cannot do. And like society has never functioned that way since the dawn of time. And now we have to like function in a certain box in a workforce. And I just think men are feeling unheard. They're feeling like, I don't even know how to be a man. I don't even know, like that has never been even necessarily modeled for a lot of people in the last, I don't want to put a number on it, but maybe 2 generations or something. I don't know. And so I think young men are saying, hey, here's a space where I can be taught to pray. I can be taught to do something with my body in the worship service. I can, there is a right and a wrong, not in a dogmatic, like salvific way, but there is a culturally appropriate way to do something here in a proper, in an improper way. And you get to explore. I think that is very satisfying to a young man right now, of really clear boundaries and rules and how we relate to God and how we relate to each other and how we relate to even the opposite sex and how we relate. Right. It's just, it's very freeing in a world that says either there is no boundaries or we have to micromanage everything all the time to be, whatever, to fit whatever model we now live in. And women, I don't really know. I got to be honest. I do not live in like the Orthodox online world at all. Like that has never, I don't know what's out there. I don't know what people are.
Good.
Yeah, I don't. So I don't know many. The women I know coming into Orthodoxy have always been either like dating someone Orthodox, married to someone Orthodox, and the man was really interested, and the woman was either dragged kicking and screaming, but came to, okay, or they were like, I don't know, I'm a little hesitant. And I only know of one woman personally who was young, who came to the Orthodox Church, and it was online. She saw a funny meme about like different theologians, and there was an Orthodox one, and she was like, what is that? And started researching, and that's how it happened. So I'm not really sure, but I don't know what's drawing the women in, but I think it's the life of the women of the church is keeping them in. I think like seeing the women in the church and how they operate and how they take care of people and how it's like, there's a place for me here, and I don't have to be the one preaching, and I don't have to be the one, doing sacraments. Cause that was hard for me as someone who wanted to be like an Anglican priest. My big hill that I had to die on was, why can't women be in the priesthood? That was what I researched for a year and a half of being a catechumen. That was my big thing. And so really heavily looking into that and coming to peace with that was my kind of big thing. And so, but just seeing that there's really other avenues and places for women to just thrive. And I don't know, I'm still in my own way wrestling with all of this, but that's at least why I think men are coming. And I really don't, even here, I think it sounds like we did this journey with husbands, right? So or an influence of, okay, yeah, Lisa's shaking her head, but
me neither. No.
I guess I'm saying in my circle of Lansing, in the 4 churches that I rub shoulders with, I've only met one single woman who's come in. They've all either been tied to a man in some capacity. That is what I have seen in the 4 churches I have relationships with. So
fair enough. Yeah. Amanda, how about you?
I think sometimes women can want more of like a relational, like I've heard a lot of stories of that, a lot of convert stories of like, well, like let your wife know that she'll make friends at this new church. For me, that is not my story at all. I was very drawn to like the facts of everything. And so I think a lot of women, if you just explore like the same topics that men are interested in, like maybe not, obviously not the masculine side of it, but just like, well, this is the early church, this is the truth. I think more women than not will be drawn. That was for me, my case. Like, again, I did come into the church with my husband, but I started the search. I started saying like, I think we need to check out Orthodoxy. I think this is, a really important thing that we need to dive into. And I think especially as mothers, you want the best for your kids. And like, when you're not able to maybe answer a question, or when you don't know, like when you find out, like for me and a lot of my friends, like you find out at one point, like, wow, I know nothing about Christian history, like not one thing. And so I think even for women, when you say like, well, this is actually the history of the church, like these are actually the answers. Where do you think you got your Bible from? I think light bulbs start going off. So I think there are women that are more drawn to maybe like the relational aspects of church. But then I think there are a lot of us that are coming in for very similar reasons as men. We just want the truth. We want the truth, and we want to raise our families in the truth. So, and I just want to touch on because I loved your question about the feminism. And so I just wanted to also answer that question that, it's funny because I've had like, I think everyone, to an extent, we all grow up with little seeds of like that feminism, and we catch it like, whoa, I didn't know I thought that, or I didn't. And in Orthodoxy, it's crazy because you don't need it. Like, I think feminism maybe was created almost in like a vacuum. Like, I think there was a need for maybe women to be uplifted. Like earlier, I talked a little bit about like that toxic submission, and how if the mother of God is nothing, then we are nothing. Orthodoxy like fixes that. Like, you don't have to be a priest to be a saint or to be holy or equal to the apostles. My youngest daughter, her patron is Saint Nina, and it's so beautiful to me
Equal to the
that
apostles.
there's saints there are women on the wall. So you don't have to be a man in the Orthodox Church to be valued, to be important. You don't have to be equal. And I think in feminism, it's like, well, if you're not a man, if you can't do what men do, you're not important. And it's like, well, no, because the Theotokos, what made her important was being a woman. Like God chose her being a woman and making her a mother. That's what made her, and that's why we honor her the way that we do, because she's the mother of God. And so I just think Orthodoxy fixes all the problems that feminism puts in your brain. Orthodoxy fixes that. You don't need to be a man to be important and valued to God.
Amanda, you mentioned you have, I think, what was it, 4 kids?
I do, yes.
How many boys, how many girls?
So I have a 10-year-old girl, a 5-year-old girl, a 2.5-year-old boy, and an almost 1-year-old girl.
Congratulations.
Thank
What's
you.
it like raising children as a mother in the Orthodox Church versus perhaps what you formerly were in? What's the difference in bringing children up in the Orthodox Church versus bringing them up in a non-Orthodox world?
I love that question. Sorry. So I think there's so many differences, and with my 10-year-old specifically, because she's the oldest, and she is obsessed with the church. Oh my goodness, like she just loves it so much. And I think with Orthodoxy, it's really your whole life. Like, it's Wednesday, it's Friday, you're going to divine liturgy, you're going to confession, like it's every day. You're always talking, you're reading about the saints, whose feast day is today. I think that when we were Protestant, you're trying to, we read the Bible every day, we did these things, but you're almost trying to make your life more Christian. Like, how can I be more Christian every day? I don't know. It's like, how do I, other than reading my Bible and like checking that off, how can I really raise them as a Christian? And in Orthodoxy, just the calendar alone, you live every day you wake up a Christian, and you live your whole day that way, because you know that there's a saint for that day, or a feast day that day, or you're fasting or something, you're doing your morning prayers, your evening prayers. So it's just all around, it's all day. And even just church specifically, I always kind of had a problem with like the separation of the kids during services. I always felt that just, why are we not treating them like equal members of the church? I didn't understand. I could never understand that. And I grappled with that a lot. I really struggled. And so once we came into Orthodoxy, it's like, no, they stay with you. I was like, oh, like that makes, yeah, they are the church. They are also the church. So that was a huge difference for us. And it is difficult, especially with my 2.5-year-old little boy. He makes it fun, but it's so beautiful because they are there. They know what's happening. They're experiencing the church every single day. Seeing them take communion, seeing them take the Eucharist is the most beautiful thing that you can experience as a parent. It is incredible. So I think our whole lives now revolve around the church, whereas before I was trying so hard to make that happen, but I had no tools. I had nothing. And so in the church gives you everything. So it just completes it. Oh, you're muted again.
Muted.
Let me say it again. That is beautiful. That's really so. It's encouraging to hear that. I mean, it's really encouraging. I think we might have a lot of women that are watching this video, God willing, who are asking that question: how is it going to be different raising my family in the Orthodox Church? And that was a very good exposition of what could be. Your whole life revolves around the church and the calendar and the services and things like that. Nisa, God bless you. You lost a son earlier this year. Do you have other children?
I do.
And what has this like?
Sorry?
Go ahead.
I have a 15-year-old daughter, and my husband and I also have who we call our adopted daughter, and she's 24. So for us, the transition was very different because at the moment I am the only one to become Orthodox. My husband is still Messianic. My daughter's still Messianic. So the transition in our household has been interesting because so many things in the day-to-day life for us already existed. We already had to check the calendar because we were going off of Hebrew dates instead of, old calendar dates that we do now. We already did, a prayer rule. And I've been very blessed that they've actually adopted the Orthodox prayer book instead of our Messianic Siddur we were using. So that's been a whole thing.
Wow.
But, it's funny because we joke that now that we're a mixed household, we have all these extra holidays, and we already had all these extra holidays being Messianic. So now that we're bringing the Orthodox holidays in as well, my daughter's in her glory at the idea of an 8-day Hanukkah and a 12-day Christmas this year. So we're, it's been interesting. It's definitely been different. Like I said, it was my son that had been a little bit more interested in Orthodoxy and was really looking into things. And so that, of course, has created a bit of a interesting dynamic in the way that everybody's looking at it. But it's been pretty good for the most part and transitioned pretty smoothly.
Amen. Sarah?
I love watching, I should say my kids are 6, 4, and 2. I love watching them embody this Christian life in a different way than I ever did as, growing up as a Protestant Christian. They get so much more into prostrations. They get so much more into crossing themselves, into, the holy water and kissing icons. And like when we do family prayer time, they are so much more into that than even I am because they're cradle. This is all they know. I mean, I was pregnant with my first when I was chrismated. So this is all they were born into Orthodoxy. And so watching that like embodiment and watching it to try to not be cognitive. I'm really always sensitive to, I want my kids to know Christ. And I want them to know his life and his ministry and his resurrection and what he did and how we touch that. And he touches us and we participate in that. And so it's really cool to see embodying that and their reverence for icons are holy and there's profane. And they understand that. And I think Amanda said it earlier, this idea of we don't send our kids off to children's church where they miss the liturgy. They're there. And there are times where I am 100% convinced my kids are interacting with something that I cannot see. They are, especially the younger they are, the way they stare at something, the way that my, at the time, 5-year-old daughter went to stand next to a monk who she's never talked to, never gave the time of day to, stood next to him. And then I found out later that he said he was having a bad day and he really just prayed that like God would send him an angel of mercy that day. And after he said that prayer, my 5-year-old daughter walked up to him and stood next to him for the liturgy, who she has never interacted with this man before. And it's like, she is picking up on something that I am too jaded to pick up on because I do not have a childlike soul. And there's something about, you know what I mean? Like the space, my kids just, that doesn't mean they're not loud. That doesn't mean they have bad days. They have those days, but they, by and large, they are connected to the liturgy in ways that I am not. They are connected at family prayer time in ways that I am not. And it's just, it goes beyond, and I try really hard to harbor that, but I know that's not me. I know that it's God. I can only do so much. And it's just really cool to see them embody a life that I'm still learning to be comfortable with in some ways. So, yeah.
Well, when a person converts, obviously as an adult like you all have done, you've got your side of the family and you've got your husband's side of the family that you still have to sit next to at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you've got to explain to them, why is it that why you make the sign of the cross, and they go, well, where does it say that in the Bible? Or you get these kind of questions all the time. Or they just think that you've joined a cult or something like that. How have your families responded to your conversion? I mean, Sarah and Amanda, in your case, the whole family came in. Nisa, in your case, God willing, that's going to happen. But how have your families outside of your spouse and your kids, of course, what do they say?
I can share. So my mom has been amazing. She wasn't. She didn't understand completely. She was raised for a little while Catholic before becoming, I think, till maybe 12, before becoming Protestant. And so a lot of things that I actually didn't know, like for example, as a Protestant, I didn't know that Christ descended into Hades after his crucifixion. My mom knew that. And so I was like, well, you didn't tell me that. Um, so things like that, that my mom was like, oh yeah, I know that, or I've heard that. And so for now, she says, she said, I'm happy. You guys are happy. You're Christians. She says, we're Christians just with extra steps. So she's been super loving about it. And it's funny because a few months ago, I was really like worried, like if my husband and I die, these kids need to be Orthodox. Like they need to be raised Orthodox. They have to be. And so I went to my mom and I said, Mom, like if we pass, if my husband and I, Alex and I pass, like please just take them to church. Like you just have to park outside. Like everybody knows them. You just park, they will get off. And she said, Amanda, if you guys die, I will convert. And I was like, look, I get emotional thinking about it. I got like so emotional. I started like crying. Sorry, so silly, but I was like, wow, that is like incredible that you would do that, like for my, like you see the importance. So I think she sees how important it is to us. I think she sees that it's been beautiful for our family. She sees my 10-year-old and my 5-year-old love the faith so much. So I definitely pray for her every single day. She's on my list, so hopefully she comes around. But a funny thing is, another relative did say that we were being very gullible and that we might become Muslim after this because we were on that trajectory of just falling for things. So I was like, well, we're not Muslim yet, so we're on we're okay. But and then my husband's family is uninterested. They are supportive. They came to our baptism. They're a little more like a-religious, and so they were supportive. So we really haven't had any negativity conversion.
Okay. Very little drama, it sounds like. That can be a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until you get to that first Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah. Right.
Sarah, you were pursuing ordination in ACNA, and so forth, and so you kind of come from a different area where your whole family probably was used to the idea of you being in a liturgical church. And your now husband was already Orthodox, right? So
no, his story is his story. He was not formally Orthodox, but he was in every manner except the actual chrismation.
Okay.
He was Orthodox. Yeah, no, my husband and I was interesting because he comes from a lineage of Wesleyan pastors, and my dad's a Nazarene pastor, and both of our families, like are outside of my husband's and I, have a lot of pastors in the family of whatever these kind of holiness movement people that are very educated, have master's degrees, PhDs, you know what I mean, in theology. So I still to this day will call my dad and we'll talk about like some super really Bible nerd something that he discovered, I discovered, and we talk about it. But I think that, there is a level of everyone kind of knows their stuff on all sides of the family, and we respect that. And we're not going to see eye to eye on stuff. It's just understood that we're going to have differences on our theological worldviews, on, where we kind of come down on stuff. And there's things we talk about and there's things we don't. And there's, I think that's just kind of how things have functioned in kind of
but you come from a place where in the family, theology is interesting. Theology is something that people like to engage in and so forth. Have they seen in Orthodoxy anything that they have come to say, yeah, not a bad idea, or maybe they have that right, or we know that was given up, or whatever? Have you had those kind of
not since I've been Orthodox. I will say from a young age, there are things that my dad was very clear about, like, hey, the Orthodox Church has this right, by the way. The Catholics have this right. I think that these, you know what I mean? He's been very clear to, like, I think the Orthodox are right on this thing. Oh, I think they're wrong on this thing. I think so. This was something that growing up I heard all the time, that, you could be in the Nazarene church and disagree with how the Nazarenes do something, and you could think this church does it better. But right, this was just normal. So I think there is a level of hey, I know you kind of do this thing and we don't, or you have open communion and we don't. I mean, just those types of, but it doesn't really go beyond kind of an intellectual conversation.
Interesting.
Yeah, in my case.
Nisa.
For us, it was definitely mixed. On my husband's family side, because of the way that history went and when his mom's family immigrated, he actually grew up evangelical. So they already dealt with us switching from like evangelical Christian to Torah keeping to so for me to make this transition, I've mostly been met with a lot of yeah, whatever, because they already have gotten used to me changing things. Because of course it was a big transition for us, 14 years ago. For my extended family, for the most part, it was a lot of acceptance. I've got family members who just, yeah, cool, whatever. I've had family members who, who won't discuss it at all because they just don't want to get into it, because most of my family is not theological and they're just like, well, no, you've just left what we do. And so I just leave it alone and I do the best I can to set the best example. I pray for them and I call it good and we keep going.
Okay, amen. Amen to that. Just keep going. I know for a lot of people, they have to face the prospect, if they become Orthodox, of really giving up a lot in terms of friendships and in terms of whatever community they come from and the relationships they had there, because a lot of people in that former Protestant community, whatever it happens to be, thinks they're apostatizing, joining a cult, whatever it is, and often will present that person with a challenge or a rebuke. If you join them, we can't be friends, and things like that. Did any of you experience that in your former parishes and your former churches? That idea of losing a lot of friends that you may have had at the time?
Coming to Orthodoxy, thankfully, no. I've had a couple people, from the Messianic. I had a couple of friends who have kind of distanced themselves a little since I became Orthodox, primarily because of the view on icons. But for the most part, when it came to Orthodoxy, no, I had already lost a lot of the people who had a problem with a difference of opinion or a difference of belief when I became Messianic. And so I had already shrugged off most of that type of person.
You found a pearl of great price and you were willing to push forward no matter what the cost. Okay. God bless you. Ladies, anything like that? Any relationships that you had that you valued that someone said, no, we can't be friends anymore if you go down this road? Amanda?
For us, we were attending a really small, country Baptist church, like 2 minutes from our house. And so we did sit with the pastor and his wife, and they were very gracious with us. They obviously heavily disagreed. And so we lost the relationships we'd made in that church. But it was small. And so we'd only been going there for a short time because we moved not too long ago. And so we'd only been there maybe for a year or two. So we did lose those friendships, but what we gained was a lot, was so much more. And so our core group of friends are mainly Protestant. Like our homeschool co-op is really where our main friends groups are. And they don't care. If anything, they ask questions. Like we'll talk about church history. And so they are a little interested sometimes, and they've been super supportive. They don't have a problem. It's just foreign to them. They have no idea what it is, which is where I was 3 years ago. But we haven't lost major friendships.
You mentioned homeschooling, and I hear that a lot from converts, male and female, of course. Are you in a consortium of any kind with other Orthodox groups with your homeschooling?
No,
Nisa smiled real big when I asked that question, so I got to ask her what that smile means. But go ahead, Amanda.
Where we are, no, there really is not a huge community. There is a community about an hour and a half away of Orthodox homeschoolers that they meet. We've gone a few times, but it's mostly smaller kids. So just the drive for like just the little kids to play was not really, we chose not to. We just have a lot going on, so it was like a little too much. But in our area, no, there really isn't much. Maybe one day. We hope that one day it's gonna grow and we'll be able to do something maybe out of our own church, hopefully. But for right now, no.
Okay, Sarah? Anything about homeschooling that is now a bigger advantage being Orthodox than before?
Yeah, we don't. I was originally going to homeschool at one point, but I found just an alternative schooling where I teach an ecumenical religious ed class there. And it's great. It's like a small classical Charlotte Mason nature school that is on its, I think, 4th year now. And it's worked. There's a couple Orthodox kids that go there. The one of the founding families goes to our parish. We just don't have. There are a couple Orthodox churches in Lansing, but there is no, at this point in time, some sort of like Orthodox co-op or Orthodox something. But I've really found a home with this group. As like, I love this community and these families. And there's if I'm doing religious ed, I have the educational background to be able to not step on any sort of toes and know who are the kids in my class, what are their theological backgrounds, what can and can I not say, you know what I mean? So it kind of works for my kids. They're getting, it all kind of works out. So, but I do know that the Orthodox homeschool community is booming, that big parishes that have a lot of kids, they're starting Orthodox co-ops and little hybrid schools and all that stuff. And I'm all about it. I say, go for it. If that was like in my area, I'd be way more connected to it. It's just not a thing in my area. So I'm trying to get something going, like a little Orthodox class for like after school hours. I am trying to get that up and running in the next year or two, but yeah.
So Nisa, what was that big smile when I asked that question? I got a kick out of it.
Because there is an ongoing conversation over here right now. So I have been a homeschool educator for, jeepers, 9 years now. And not just a homeschool mom, like for the last 5 years, I have educated additional kids as well that come to my house to homeschool. So we are the co-op. And at the moment, all of my students are senior high. So I've only got a couple years left. And there's been this ongoing joke that what am I going to do after graduation? Well, in our current group, when they sign up, they know that they are going to be getting a Christian education, even though I have had secular students. I still have a secular student this year, but that their education is primarily Christian. And we do bend our schedule around the Messianic holidays, all the different religious holidays, everything. But that we teach all Christian theology and whatnot so that they can study it out for themselves and come to their best answers. So we have studied everything from the outside in. Last year for their theology class, they did the Catechism of St. Philaret. So we've done kind of everything. This year it's world religions. So not just Christianity, but all of it so that they can assess it and see where they stand. So, definitely praying that the secular kid finds something out of that. But the ongoing joke has been with graduation coming in a few years for all of my current students. My youngest student right now is in grade 10. Our church has so many littles. Like probably 40% of our church is under 7 years old. And the question then is becoming, should we be starting a pod with the church for some of these kids in the next number of years? And so maybe there will be an Orthodox pod in Sylvan in a few years. We'll have to see.
Amen. Amen to that. So, ladies, as we wind down the episode, I want to conclude by asking you all to share your thoughts on this question, which is, what advice would you give to the ladies that may be watching this episode? They're thinking about joining the Orthodox Church. They're struggling with joining the Orthodox Church, and they see you having done that. Okay, so what do you tell them? What are your parting thoughts and advice to the women watching this, and what do you say to them?
I think I would say just show up. Just show up on Sundays, go to Divine Liturgy. If you're reluctant, do some research, but don't get bogged down by questions or I think it can be so overwhelming, even for someone like me that I was desperately wanting to be a part of the church, and I was very overwhelmed, even just by the calendar. Like the liturgical calendar really confused me. It took me a whole year being like in the church to say like, oh, I get it. I was so overwhelmed. And so I would just say, reluctant or not, just show up to Divine Liturgy. If you're going to a catechism class, do that. And just slowly embrace it. Just show up. And I think just showing up, things are revealed to you in their time. So you don't have to have every single answer, or you don't have to agree with everything. Or even for like me, I didn't disagree with anything, but I wasn't used to it. It was something so foreign to me. And I think that happens so much. It's so foreign. But when you start showing up, things start to click little by little. Oh, okay. Oh, this is when we cross ourselves. Oh, everybody's bowing. Okay. And so the less foreign it is, the more you can absorb, because you've done away with the newness of it and the overwhelm and the confusion, and you can start enjoying and partaking. So for us now, like I mentioned earlier, like I shared, I love the liturgical calendar. It is like the most beautiful thing that we all share. My kids wake up in the morning, oh, whose feast day is it today? And they're excited. And so little by little, but it takes time to get there. So little by little. So just show up. Even if you're, I know a lot of women can be reluctant. And if you're not reluctant, still just show up and don't try to dive in so hard, because I think that happened to me, just the overwhelm of everything. You will learn it. I have learned nothing compared to what I need to still learn. And, just going one day at a time and embracing the church, I think is just like the most important thing.
Amanda brings up some outstanding advice. We clergy see a lot of, especially young men, who show up at our doors and they I mentioned this earlier, they say they've read this books, and they'll say things like, I'm ready to become a catechumen, and they've never experienced a divine liturgy before. So this idea about showing up and being used to the rhythm of the church, to the rhythm of the parish, to the liturgical life and the sacramental life, week after week, month after month. When I get guests who come to my church and they say, well, how long should I come to experience it? I say, at least about 3 months before you can even consider yourself to be an inquirer. It takes about 3 months to get used to the cycle and the rhythm of the parish. So showing up is a very big part of this. This is an experiential faith. It's not a faith to be found in books other than the scriptures. It really is something you have to show up to. So Amanda, that is a great observation. Thank you very much for that. Ladies? Sarah? Advice to the person listening to this podcast episode.
I don't think my advice is going to be different about like specifically Orthodoxy than just anyone like waiting to encounter Christ. Is if you're not praying yet, find a spot in your house and start praying. And that might literally look like 20 seconds of silence in the beginning. That might be what it looks like. And watching God take that and run with it. And maybe that means journaling your questions. And maybe it means, right, just if you're not making space to be quiet before God, that's where I would start before anything else. Because I think, to my very core, I think Christ is most experienced within the Orthodox Church, but he is experienced outside of it as well. Now, don't hear me saying something crazy. I'm saying like I want everyone to be part of the church, the bride of Christ. But I think sometimes we make this so complicated, and it's if you're questioning, if you're on the fence about something, first just make room in your life for God, because he will take you where you need to go. For you to work out your salvation in his bride of Christ, in his church. And I don't want to make it more complicated than that. I think it's just carve out space for Jesus Christ, who rose from the dead and who drags his people out of Hades with him, and he'll show up. That's it.
Amen.
I think for me, it's, especially when people first hear about Orthodoxy from some of the fringier groups like Messianic, Torah, certain Protestant groups, things like that. When they're looking for that first century faith, they want that faith of the apostles and the disciples of the apostles and those who saw and lived in these places and understood the culture differently. Come and see, because this is what they're usually looking for. And this is where that truth will be found in Orthodoxy. But at the same time, when you come, you will feel out of place in most cases, because it is so different from what you've been taught to think it looks like. It is going to have those awkward moments of, I don't know when to cross myself and bow, or you might do what I did and get confused between communion and antidiran. And the first time I got given the blessed bread and wine, I thought I had accidentally taken communion, and I left the church crying. I was so scared because I was so new to it. And it is so different. And so recognize that you're going to be back to being a baby Christian, and that this time it could very well feel like you are a kid looking to those who have been in the faith longer than you, of, oh, this is when I'm supposed to cross myself, and this is when I'm supposed to do this, and learn from it. Like, watch and learn and ask questions and be exploratory like the kids are, so that you can learn it the same way that they do, and you'll begin to understand it far better than if you just come in thinking you know it.
Wonderful. Ladies, thank you very much for taking of your time to share with us your stories, wonderful stories. To our viewers, look up parts 1 and 2 if this is the first episode you're seeing in this series. There are wonderful stories out there of women who have found their way to the Orthodox Church. And I challenge anybody who asks what the Orthodox Church is. My first response tends to be a question back to the person posing that, which is, ask yourself this question: what happened to the church the apostles left behind? That church exists. It has existed in continued link going back to the first century, and the Orthodox Church is that church. So if you're looking for the ancient faith, the early church, the apostolic church, whatever you want to call it, it's still here, and it has been for 2,000 years in the Orthodox Church. I wish we had more parishes in America, but maybe seeing the growth that we're seeing now, there'll be a missionary explosion in the years ahead where we'll see parishes, who knows, every 20 minutes in the American landscape. May it be so. Ladies, again, thank you for your time this afternoon. This is something that has been probably a long time coming, hearing the stories of women coming into the church. Thank you, and God bless you. Viewers, thank you for joining us, and may you live a transfigured life.